This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. There have been several shocking cases of potential terrorists busted in New York City and elsewhere just in the last few days. And this comes as Biden's executive order on the border seems to have done very, if anything, to stem the flow of illegal immigration on our borders. Well, joining us now about all of this and potential threats to the homeland, which seem to be at an all-time high, to discuss all of this is Mark Morgan, the former Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection. He also had a very prestigious 20-year career with the FBI. Mark, great to have you here.
Hey, as always, thanks for having me, Rita. Love being on with you.
You know, there was this case recently of the guys from Tajikistan, 8 of them, and they had crossed the border. There were reports that they even had been vetted. How concerning is that, Mark Morgan?
Rita, this is the best way that I can say this, is this serves as yet another wake-up call for the entire country. We have to stop playing politics with our national security and letting misguided ideology dictate our border policies. You can't secure a nation when your policies allow in 10 million illegal aliens plus another 2 million known gotaways in just over 36 months from 180 different countries that we know several of these countries are hostile nations to ours. We know that they sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism. We are literally playing Russian roulette with our national security. I mean, the director of the FBI, the greater intelligence community, DHS, as a matter of fact. In fact, the DHS IG just released a report saying how the vetting, it's not happening, and that the terrorist organizations are absolutely exploiting the chaos and lawlessness at our borders. Rita, what more do we need before we wake up and say we've got to shift what we're doing?
You know, these guys, there is a claim that ICE had vetted them, but the problem was that, of course, their home countries are not providing any details of their history. So they got into the country. Is that just another layer where many countries are not providing the criminal history because they don't want to cooperate with the United States?
Rita, that's exactly right. That's why I get so angry when I hear this phrase, fully vetted. It's an oxymoron. It's a lie that's being told to the American people by this administration, but specifically the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas. It's a lie. And what you just did, look, it's common sense. I keep saying you don't have to be a border security expert. Just use your common sense. And that's exactly what you did, Rita. That's why I love coming on your show. At the end of the day, think about this. There are a multitude of countries where we do not have diplomatic relationships with, meaning we're not getting any information. And let me give you just a couple examples. So let's say we get a single adult male from Lebanon. Do you think we're working with the Lebanese government and they're letting us know whether he's a member of Hezbollah before we release him? Of course that's not happening. And this week, so just a couple of days ago, right? So we got arrest of 8 individuals from Tajikistan. Do you think that country gave us information on those individuals before we released them? Of course it's not happening. And that's why I'm saying is even the individuals we encounter, we do not have the capability to properly vet them, to understand what their criminal background is or what their affiliation with terrorist organization from the home country. And that's just who we apprehend. Think about the 2 million known gotaways.
Yeah, that is a stunning number. And you think about how much destruction 19 caused, of course, on 9/11. When we go back, I mean, it is really overwhelming. Do you have any idea, Mark, how they actually got these guys? Because it seems like they let them into the country, as we know, and then somehow they got to the point where they got a tip, clearly, and they had them on wiretap. One of them, I think, was talking about a bomb, which is frightening. Do you have any idea sort of how it led and how this came together?
No, and that's another issue. Nobody does because there's still a lot that we don't know here. And I think that's another travesty, but that's another example of this administration, the complete lack of transparency. I remember last year in 23, the DHS put out a, quote, terrorism bulletin, right, where they were talking about, hey, people could get violent because of their feelings of the upcoming 2024 election, right? And DHS put a terrorism bulletin out because of that. And now we just arrested 8 terrorists, oh, by the way, from Tajikistan, which is the same area that launched the attack in Russia against the concert hall. And yet, and we have all this information from the director of the intelligence community coming out about the threats posed by the chaos and lawlessness at our border, yet DHS, nothing. They've remained silent. They're not providing the American people with any information with respect to the degree of the threat, what we should be concerned about, or what they're doing. We've got nothing. So we don't know.
You know, as we look at some of the numbers, too, and you talked about how many that we know of. And again, there are so many, sadly, millions more that we don't know of. But you look at the numbers, and I was looking at how many have crossed and the difference of President Trump versus President Biden. You know it all too well, Mark Morgan, but fiscal year 2017, 2 on the terror watch list, 6 in 2018, fiscal year 2019 under Trump, 0, 2023. And then it gets to, of course, President Biden, fiscal year 15, then 2022, 19. And in fiscal year 2023, 169. I mean, that is a stunning increase. How can the border agents actually handle this? And how can America handle this?
They can't, and we're not. That's the point. It's a great question, Rita. So that's 367 illegal aliens that the Border Patrol caught trying to illegally enter our border on the FBI's terror watch list. And again, you quoted from Trump. That's a 2,500% increase from administration to administration. Let that sink in. 2,500% increase. And again, that's who we've encountered. But what we just showed of the rest of the individuals from Tajikistan, even if we encounter them, right? Even if we encounter them, we're still letting them in because we do not have the ability to effectively vet everyone that's coming across. And then I'll go back to the 2 million gotaways. So literally, that's why I keep saying it's not if or when the threat comes to our border. We already know it is. We're literally talking about the data of how many terrorists are trying to enter our border. The issue is they're already here. And Rita, that's why I say our southwest border now is more vulnerable now than it was prior to 9/11. That should be shocking to all of us, and that should wake us all up. And that's why the director in congressional testimony is coming across like he's worried and he's concerned because he knows the threat's already here, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have another attack.
You talked about the FBI director, Mark Morgan, because, of course, when he's testified, he does seem to be heightening the rhetoric. And he usually seems like a guy who seems like sort of an understated guy, but yet he is absolutely sounding the alarm. As someone like you who worked at the FBI for 2 decades, when you hear the head of the FBI, again, normally a very kind of mild-mannered guy, saying, yeah, there is something like never before, because he's talking about all the threats, of course, what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, what's going on in the Middle East, China. I mean, there's so many areas and so many players right now that could potentially try to do harm to America. How concerned should we be?
Very, because on 2 fronts. One, anytime the FBI director would talks about threats, right? We should always hear. But to your point, especially this director, because he has been understated for 3 years or a little bit more. He has really downplayed it, in my opinion. He has not been strong enough. He has not been vocal enough until just recently. So the fact that the FBI director, and especially this FBI director that's finally now being vocal, we should all our ears should absolutely perk. We should all be concerned right now because of what he is saying. And look, another example is he talked about Afghanistan. He was very clear-eyed about how we literally, the way we left Afghanistan, we lost our eyes and ears. We lost intelligence to be able to understand and be able to get derogatory information to place people on the FBI's terror watch list. So there's a multitude of cascading effects of why he sounded alarm. At the end of the day, though, what we should all be hearing is, why? Why now? Why now, Rita, is he becoming so vocal? I think he's trying to cover his ass, right? Because he knows the threat is here, and he knows this administration's, their open border policies allowed the threat in. He knows it. They've got intelligence, and that's why he's speaking up finally.
You know, we're going to head back to the border, but as you're talking about Afghanistan, I also wonder, Mark Morgan, and as someone who has spent your career in law enforcement, how much the world is also watching the way we pulled out of Afghanistan and what an embarrassment that was, leaving the weaponry, leaving, as you talked about, our allies high and dry. Does that also sadly incentivize? And I think it comes at the same time as we are also not responding necessarily to these attacks from like the Houthis. Remember, they were firing on us. You know, we've been kind of playing both sides, it seems. The U.S. administration sadly has with what's been happening in the Middle East. Is all of that sending a signal that, you know, we're weak?
It does, Rita, and here's why. Let me put this in perspective. Is that what the signal that it sends is that we are not taking the terrorist threat serious enough. And here's why I say this, is because the terrorist organizations throughout the world, this is what people have to understand. Everybody listening, their commitment to do harm to this country, to bring death and destruction to our homeland, is unwavering. It's stronger now than it ever has been. And if they see weakness, they're going to absolutely seize on that. And I think the way we left Afghanistan and some other stuff we've done, we just mentioned, that's what they're seeing, and they're sensing that. And so they're continuing to look for every possibility that they can exploit. And they have to look no further than our southwest border. The chaos and lawlessness at our border is providing the absolute perfect gateway for terrorist organizations to exploit. And the arrest of these 8 terrorists from Tajikistan is the quintessential example of that. What else do we need for this country to wake up and demand we do the right thing for this nation and secure our borders?
America's beverage companies are investing in America. We're American companies, making American products with American workers in America's hometowns. We're local bottlers and manufacturers, operating in all 50 states, employing more than 275,000 Americans in good-paying jobs, delivering for the nation, because we believe in the promise of America and the people who make it great. Learn more at wedeliverforamerica.org. Paid for by the American Beverage Association.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
What about also all the Russian nationals that have been crossing, Mark Morgan, and also the Chinese nationals? I mean, these numbers are skyrocketing.
Again, Rita, a common sense. We should be asking this government the same question, and we should be demanding that they tell us Where's the intelligence? Where's the terrorism? Where's the intelligence bulletin from DHS about the Chinese nationals? And this administration, 50,000 Chinese nationals, the overwhelming majority are single adult males. Why in the hell has that been happening? I mean, that is a legitimate common sense question. This is not normal. At the same time that's happening, Rita, we have the director of the FBI saying the threat that China poses against our economic and national security, this is his words, not mine, quote, is the threat of our generation. So while the director is saying China poses the threat to our generation, we've had 50,000 Chinese nationals illegally enter across our border, and we shouldn't be concerned or worried about that? Come on, of course we should.
And we also had, I spoke with Gordon Chang on one of our shows, and I'll never forget this. Where he was saying, Mark Morgan, that they're doing target practice in the United States, that they're planning for something. I mean, boy, that sounds really ominous.
And think about this, Rita. I'll foot stomp that. So there's a law in China that says any Chinese national, regardless of where they live or they're residing throughout the world, that any time that China requests them to actually act as intelligence collectors for China, that they have to do it by law. Think about that. So we've literally just let in approximately 50,000 potential intelligence collectors for the People's Republic of China. That should also shock us.
Has anything changed with this executive order by President Biden? What's your reaction to him finally looking like he's trying to do something? I say looking like he's trying to do something.
Yeah, here's what has changed. Here's what's changed, Rita. It's actually legalized and normalized an unconscionable level of chaos and lawlessness at the borders. He actually said that 2,500 individuals illegally enter our borders is acceptable. I guess, analogy I could use, that's literally like a chief of police in any city throughout the United States saying, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and let 500 vehicles be stolen every single day before I actually tell the police officers to do something. So we're not going to investigate up to 500, but the 501st vehicle that gets stolen, then we'll investigate it. That's literally what he's done on the border. And there's so many exceptions and loopholes and exemptions, it looks like it would resemble a block of Swiss cheese. I mean, besides the 2,500 exemptions, unaccompanied minors don't count. The northern border is completely exempt. Anybody that wants to come to our land ports of entry or fly into one of 45 airports through the CBP One app, it's also exempt. So it's done nothing, and nothing has changed. In fact, the numbers have actually increased a little bit since the executive order went into play. It doesn't end catch and release. It doesn't de-incentivize anybody from coming. It doesn't address the threats that are already in the country that he's let in, and does nothing to actually secure the border. This isn't about a serious order to address the crisis at the border. It's designed to address the crisis at the polls for President Biden.
Why do you think they have continued to allow it? And just like you said, here it is, months away from Election Day. He sees the polls. He sees that the border is an enormous issue for many Americans. In many cases, it's the number one issue because it's common sense that an open border is dangerous for the country. Is this all about politics, clearly, and smoke and mirrors to say, hey, I did something when the debate comes up with him and President Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, he is upside down in every single poll when it comes to border security. The last poll I saw, he's literally upside down 28 points from the America's confidence in what Trump would do with respect to what Biden is doing and would continue to do. 28 points. That's astronomical. This is a political stunt. There's nothing meaningful here. And again, look, everybody listen. You don't have to listen to me. Go to the numbers, right? Look at the data. The numbers speak for themselves. Nothing has changed and nothing will change. The flow of people coming to our country illegally has not changed because this is not a serious order at all. It's a feigned attempt to just make it look like, as you said, he's doing something 4.5 months before the election and right before the debate. That's all this is about.
And it also comes after he said, well, they can't do anything. It's all in the hands of Congress. And then suddenly, surprise, surprise, there's an executive order.
Yeah, quote, Rita, right? Quote, this President Biden, quote, I've done all I can do. Just give me the power to Congress. As if Congress is the only entity that can bestow on the presidency the executive order. And remember, this is the same president that took his executive pen and issued 94 executive orders that destroyed and dismantled the network of tools and authorities and policies we had under place under President Trump. If he just took that same pen and reinstated those orders, we'd be good.
Right, but he won't. And he doesn't want to do anything that's tied to President Trump, which is another thing, even if they are working, right? I mean, in a sense, had he just done nothing, we would have been so much more secured, correct?
Yeah, I wish he would have stayed at the beach, right? I mean, Rita, just stay at the beach. If he would have just stayed at the beach, like you said, and done nothing, we would have still been in a much better position than we are right now, hands down.
Yeah, how scary is that? Before I let you go, Mark Morgan, I also want to talk about another case that's raising a lot of headlines. This one in New York, where cops just did a routine traffic stop because they saw that the guy had his license covered and he had like tinted windows. They pull this guy over and boy, they suddenly see weapons, and then they keep going further, and the guy ends up having, it was 9 loaded magazines. He had a 9mm loaded gun. He had handcuffs, 2 axes, a stun gun, multiple knives, a weighted whip, an expandable baton. He also had an NYPD vest and an MTA vest. And he also had an NYPD uniform, some items, some patches. That sounds really ominous. And he also had sort of jihadist sympathies because they went on to social media platforms and saw that he was definitely sort of professing some things. He also had something inscribed on one of these weapons, sort of, sorry, I'm doing this, and then something in Arabic. That's really scary, too. That's a whole other issue. We don't know necessarily if there's any border or any connection there, but it just talks about also these folks who are in the country already who may have these, sympathies towards these very fanatical groups. Your thoughts about how do we clamp down on them and how do you track them down as someone who had been at the FBI for so long?
Well, Rita, here's a couple of thoughts I think about. This is a serious threat. So we should, from the Department of Justice and all the federal resources, as well as state and local resources, law enforcement, intelligence, national security resources, they should all be dedicated to seeking out these type of threats that you just described. Again, as I was listening to you, I hope everybody felt the same way that I did. Had a couple of chills running down their back, especially since it's New York, about the seriousness of a threat. Our resources should be focused on those kind of threats. Our resources should not be focusing on political persecution through prosecution. That's the first thing that stands out in my mind. If we got back to focus on our mission and focus on actually protecting the American people from threats as you just described, we'd be in a hell of a lot better place than we are today.
This Father's Day at Lowe's, score free gifts for the greatest dad. Right now, get a free Blackstone 8-piece accessory kit when you buy a Blackstone 28-inch griddle. Plus, get 2 free select Craftsman V20 tools when you buy an RP brushless drill and impact driver combo kit. Shop these deals and more this Father's Day at Lowe's. We help, you save. Valid through 6/15 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
How tough is it to track down some of these sort of extremists or fanatics that have a proclivity? We often have seen, where it's been somebody who's been in America for a while or an American citizen with these sort of sympathies to whether it's to Hamas or whether it's to Hezbollah or ISIS or Al Qaeda.
Two things, Rita. A very good question. 2 things. So this guy, so far, there's still a lot we don't know. So there's a little bit of speculation here, but it's all lining up. What we go is he would fall into what we call homegrown violent extremists. It's extremely difficult because a lot of the homegrown violent extremists, they've never popped up on any intelligence radar, right? They haven't dipped their toe in the terrorist pond. And so there is no information on them. There is no DROG. They haven't popped up anywhere. They're kind of referred to as an unknown, right? And that's the same way why the border is so such an important issue, because there's so many individuals, 180 different countries that we know sponsor, harbor, facilitate terrorism, that we're letting in this country that we don't know anything about. And even the ones we encounter, if they haven't dipped their toe in that terrorism pond, that doesn't mean they're not a terrorist. It just means we don't know anything about them. That makes them the most dangerous threat of all. And it's impossible we do not have enough resources to keep up with that.
How do we get rid of these people that are in the country? And what happens to, say, these guys from Tajikistan? Because it's not like Tajikistan necessarily wants them back either.
So, Rita, look, seriously, I'm not trying to blow smoke your way. This is why I love coming on your show. That's another question. here. So what we learned after 9/11 is that we had this fundamentally shift from a reactive law enforcement mission to a preventative, proactive national security mission, meaning so at our border, we need to do what has been the mission since day one, is to deter the threats and prevent the threats from coming in. This administration has literally walked away from 20 years of that proactive, preventative approach. We're literally letting the threats into our country, and then we're having a discussion, oh, crap, what do we do now? Well, I guess we better get better at reacting once the threat happens. No, that's insanity, because you described a lot of these countries, like you described, including China, they refuse to take back their own citizens. So if we let them in the United States, what do we do now? I mean, we literally could be eating threats to our national security in our country because other countries won't take them back, and we walked away from that preventative approach by opening the borders, reinstating catch and release, and releasing them in our country rather than not allowing them in. It's that simple.
Yeah, and it also just shows how lengthy of a process it is once the sort of the floodgates are open, if you will, Mark, of all the layers to this that really make it complicated. Once someone has said, hey, come on in, come one, come all, which just seems to be what we have seen under this president. This could be generational, right, in terms of fixing the damage.
Absolutely. Again, I'll go back to China. China refuses to take back their own citizens, and we've allowed 50,000 in. And oh, by the way, one of our just unconscionable laws is if there is no reasonable expectation that an illegal alien will be repatriated, guess what? We have to release them within 180 days. So someone could literally illegally enter, be from a hostile nation, and our law says if they don't take them back, we got to release them in the United States. In what planet does that make sense? That is absolutely an absurd law, and that's one of many things that Congress could absolutely change and needs to change. And
why hasn't the Republican Congress sort of cracked down on that layer that you just talked about? Because that's frightening.
It is frightening, and this is what I say. And this is why I'm really not welcome to Capitol Hill by either party, because my statement is very clear. The Democrats, this White House, supported by the Democratic Party, has caused the chaos and lawlessness at our border, but the Republicans have failed once again the American people by refusing to demonstrate the political strength, will, and courage to fix it. We had H.R. 2, the strongest piece of border security legislation that was passed over a year ago by the House. It would have actually secured the border. And Speaker Johnson promised the American people that he was going to, quote, hold the line and make sure that H.R. 2 was going to be attached to the foreign aid package. And at the midnight hour, he just walked away from his commitment and promised the American people. And he provided and shepherded $95 billion to other countries to secure, defend, and protect their border. And he walked away from H.R. 2 and gave us nothing to protect our own border. So so everybody on Capitol Hill is responsible for this.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of blame to go around, just like you said. And the H.R. 2, you're right. It's interesting because they keep saying, no, there's been nothing from Congress. And they, of course, point to the other. They point to what went in the Senate. But that is, of course, a whole different package. And H.R. 2 was much stronger, much tougher, and much better for America. Mark Morgan, it's really great to have you here. It is such an important conversation. And everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this very powerful and eye-opening podcast. And Mark, always appreciate your great insight, and thank you for your incredible service for decades to this country. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Rita.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.